High Chancellor Vortex looked at the official document on his crystalline desk and felt all four of his stomachs drop. The letterhead was unmistakable. Earth, Diplomatic Corps. Application for Galactic Council membership. This has to be some kind of joke, he muttered, his purple tentacles twitching with anxiety. But no, there it was, complete with that terrifying human signature trait, excessive politeness. They had actually said please and thank you in the same sentence. Twice. Yeah. Security Chief Craig burst through the chamber doors, his scales rattling like armor. Chancellor, we have a code orange situation. The human is here. Already? But the meeting isn't for another solar cycle. He says he wanted to arrive early to make sure he wasn't inconveniencing anyone. He brought donuts. Vortex's eye stalks drooped in horror. Food gifts. The most insidious form of human psychological warfare. Sound the emergency alert. Get everyone to the main chamber. And Crag, whatever you do, don't eat the donuts. Too late, sir. Half the security team is already asking him for the recipe. Within minutes, the emergency session was called. Representatives from 47 different species filled the grand chamber, all of them looking like they'd rather be anywhere else in the galaxy. The Zephyrians had even worn their ceremonial combat armor, which was traditionally reserved for planetary invasions. Ambassador Jake Murphy walked into the chamber with the kind of easy confidence that made every alien in the room simultaneously reach for their panic buttons. He was exactly what the intelligence reports had described. Average height, brown hair, unremarkable in every way except for one terrifying feature. He was smiling. Not the predatory grin of a Vorkanian warrior or the calculated smirk of a Plutonian merchant. This was worse. This was a genuine, friendly, I'm happy to meet you smile that somehow managed to be more threatening than a plasma cannon. Good morning, everyone, Jake said, setting down a box that presumably contained more donuts. Thank you so much for making time to see me. I know you're all incredibly busy running a galactic civilization and all. A collective shudder ran through the chamber. Gratitude and acknowledgement of their hard work. Classic human manipulation tactics. Chancellor Vortex cleared his throat, which sounded like a garbage disposal having an existential crisis. Ambassador Murphy, we appreciate your, enthusiasm, but perhaps we should get straight to business. Absolutely, Jake beamed, and somehow his smile got even more terrifying. I'm just excited to be here. Earth has been looking forward to joining the galactic community for so long. We've got so many ideas for collaboration and friendship building. Security Chief Craig's scales turned from green to a sickly yellow. Friendship building. The humans weren't even trying to hide their agenda anymore. Before we proceed, Vortex said, consulting his notes with trembling tentacles, we need to address some concerns that have been raised about your species application. Jake's smile never wavered. Of course. I'm here to answer any questions you might have. Fire away. The use of violent metaphors while maintaining that innocent expression. Truly, humans were the most terrifying species in known space. Counselor Blim, a nervous creature that looked like a cross between a ferret and a filing cabinet, shuffled through a stack of reports that reached nearly to the chamber's ceiling. Ambassador Murphy, we have here documented evidence of human activities that, frankly, have caused considerable alarm throughout the galaxy. Oh no, Jake said, leaning forward with what appeared to be genuine concern. I hope no one was hurt. What seems to be the problem? General Throck, a battle-scarred veteran of the Proxima Wars, slammed his metal fist on the table. Hurt? Ambassador, your species has systematically undermined the social fabric of 17 different civilizations. Jake blinked innocently. We have? How? The Regulus incident, Blim squeaked, reading from his notes. Your people introduced something called poker to the local population. Within 3 standard months, their entire economy had collapsed because everyone was too busy trying to figure out whether their opponents were bluffing. Well, Jake said thoughtfully, poker is a great way to build interpersonal skills and learn to read social cues. We thought it would help with cultural exchange. The aliens exchanged horrified glances. Cultural exchange. The humans were trying to make it sound educational. And then there's the Zeta Reticuli situation. Throck growled. Your so-called customer service representatives completely destroyed their traditional hierarchical society. Now everyone expects to be treated with respect and courtesy. It's chaos. Jake nodded sympathetically. I can see how that would be an adjustment. But doesn't everyone deserve to be treated well? We just thought that if you're nice to people, they're more likely to be nice back. A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. The human had just casually described the most dangerous concept in the known universe, reciprocal altruism. But the worst, Blinn continued, his voice barely above a whisper. The absolute worst was what you did on Kepler 442 billion. I'm almost afraid to ask, Jake said, though he was still smiling. Small talk, Vortex said, the words dripping with revulsion. Your ambassadors taught the local population to engage in casual conversation about meaningless topics like weather and weekend plans. Do you have any idea what you've done? Jake looked genuinely puzzled. We made friends? You made their society completely non-functional. Brock roared. Now, instead of conducting business efficiently, everyone spends 47% of their day asking each other how their families are doing. And they actually care about the answers, Blinn added, looking like he might faint. They remember personal details about each other's lives. They follow up on previous conversations. It's horrifying. Jake rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture that somehow made him look even more harmless and therefore more terrifying. I mean, isn't it nice when people care about each other? We find that when you take a genuine interest in someone's life, they're more likely to trust you and work together effectively. The silence that followed was so complete you could have heard a pin drop, if pins existed in space and weren't immediately incinerated by the vacuum. Trust, Vortex repeated slowly. You weaponized trust. I wouldn't call it weaponized, Jake protested mildly. We just think that relationships work better when they're built on mutual respect and understanding. Security Chief Cragg was frantically taking notes. Mutual respect. Understanding. The human was revealing their entire strategic playbook, and he was doing it while offering them baked goods. Junior Ambassador Pip, an eager young creature that resembled an oversized hamster with opposable thumbs, raised a tentative paw. Ambassador Murphy, with all due respect, these tactics you described seem rather theoretical. Surely they can't be as effective as you claim. Jake's eyes lit up, which was somehow even more terrifying than his smile. You know what? That's a great point, Pip. How about I show you instead of just telling you? Oh no, muttered tech specialist Zork, a spider-like being whose 8 eyes were all wide with alarm. He knows my name. How does he know my name? I made sure to read everyone's nameplate when I came in, Jake explained cheerfully. It's only polite. Vortex cleared his throat desperately. Ambassador, I'm not sure a demonstration is necessary. Actually, Jake interrupted gently. I couldn't help but notice that the Regellian delegation and the Tau Sechin representatives seemed to be having some kind of disagreement. Something about mining rights in the outer spiral? Both delegations shifted uncomfortably. Their trade dispute had been going on for 3 standard years and had reached an impasse that threatened to destabilize the entire sector's economy. That's a very complex situation, the Regellian ambassador said stiffly. One that has numerous political and economic ramifications that an outsider couldn't possibly understand. Oh, I'm sure you're right, Jake agreed easily. But maybe I could just ask a few questions? Sometimes an outside perspective can help. Before anyone could stop him, Jake had turned his chair to face both delegations. So help me understand. You're both mining the same asteroid belt, right? Correct, the Tau Sechin representative said warily. And the disagreement is over who has rights to which asteroids. The Treaty of 2387 clearly states the Regellian began. But the amendment of 2392 supersedes the Tau Sechin interrupted. Jake held up his hands peacefully. Okay. So there's some confusion about the legal framework. But here's what I'm curious about. What does each of your species actually need from this belt? The question was so simple it caught both ambassadors off guard. Well, the Regellian said slowly, We primarily extract helium-3 for our fusion reactors. And we're mainly interested in the rare earth minerals for our electronics industry, the Tau Sechin added. Jake nodded thoughtfully. So you're not even mining the same materials? Couldn't you just, share the belt? Rigelians take the gas giants, Tau Sechins take the rocky asteroids? The chamber fell silent. 3 years of legal battles, economic sanctions, and diplomatic incidents, and the human had just solved it in 30 seconds. But the territorial boundaries, one delegate protested weakly, could be redrawn to reflect actual usage patterns instead of arbitrary lines on a map, Jake suggested. And hey, maybe you could even help each other out. I bet the Rigelian's gas extraction process produces mineral-rich waste products, and the Tau Sechin's mining operations probably vent helium-3 as a byproduct. Both ambassadors were staring at him with the kind of expression usually reserved for watching someone juggle live explosives. You could meet for coffee sometime and work out the details, Jake added helpfully. Coffee? Zork whispered in horror. It's a human beverage that people drink while having friendly conversations, Jake explained. Great for building relationships. The Rigelian and Tau Sechin ambassadors looked at each other, then back at Jake, then at each other again. Slowly, hesitantly, they nodded. That actually makes sense, the Rigelian admitted. We could start with a small pilot program, the Tau Sechin agreed. And just like that, a 3-year interstellar crisis was resolved with dad jokes and an offer to grab coffee. The rest of the chamber stared in stunned silence as the two former enemies began discussing implementation details like old friends. Chancellor Vortex's tentacles were trembling so violently that his translator had difficulty keeping up with his speech patterns. What did you just do? Jake looked genuinely confused by the question. I helped 2 friends work out a disagreement? It's not really that complicated. Most conflicts happen because people aren't communicating effectively about what they actually need. Friends, General Throck repeated, his voice hollow. You just called them friends. They were enemies 30 seconds ago. Were they, though? Jake asked, tilting his head. Or were they just 2 groups of people who had a problem that nobody had bothered to really listen to? The horrible truth was beginning to dawn on the assembled representatives. Humans didn't conquer through superior firepower or advanced technology. They conquered through something far more insidious. Ambassador Murphy Vortex said carefully, How exactly does your species approach interstellar relations? Jake brightened, apparently delighted by the question. Oh, it's pretty straightforward. We believe that most beings fundamentally want the same things: security, prosperity, respect, and meaningful connections with others. So we try to find ways to help everyone get what they need. And in return? Cragg prompted suspiciously. In return, they usually want to help us get what we need, Jake shrugged. It's like my grandmother always said, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Counselor Blim was frantically scribbling notes. Reciprocal obligation systems based on voluntary participation, he muttered. They've weaponized friendship. We prefer to think of it as networking, Jake corrected gently. When everyone in your network succeeds, you succeed too. It's really just enlightened self-interest. The aliens were beginning to understand the true scope of the threat. Humans didn't just make friends. They made friends who made friends who made friends, creating vast interconnected webs of mutual obligation and support. Tell me, Ambassador Vortex said with growing dread, how many species has Earth established these friendly relationships with? Jake had to think about it for a moment. Well, let's see. There's the Centaurians, obviously we've been trading partners for decades. The Arcturians love our music, so we've got a great cultural exchange program going. The vegans are really into our agricultural techniques. Oh, boy. And the Aldebarans have been super helpful with our space program. With each name, more representatives in the chamber began to shift uncomfortably. Many of them had positive relationships with those same species. The Syrians have been teaching us about stellar navigation, Jake continued cheerfully, and in return we've been sharing our medical research. The Polaresians are fascinated by our literature, and the Capellans think our comedy shows are hilarious. Dr. Zork was rapidly calculating on his tablet. "Ambassador," he said in a strangled voice, "according to my analysis, through these secondary and tertiary relationships, Earth has indirect influence over approximately 67% of known galactic civilization." Jake blinked in surprise. "Really? Huh? I guess we do know a lot of people." "You've built an empire," Thruck whispered. "An empire of friendship." "I wouldn't call it an empire," Jake protested. "Empires are built on conquest and domination. We've just made a lot of friends who happen to like working together." But the damage was done. The representatives were beginning to realize that rejecting Earth's application wouldn't stop humans from expanding their influence. They were already doing it, one handshake and coffee invitation at a time. Dr. Helix, the Council's chief psychologist, and a being that looked like a cross between an octopus and a nervous breakdown, had been unusually quiet during the proceedings. Now he spoke up with the trembling voice of someone who had seen too much. "Ambassador Murphy," he said, "our intelligence reports mention that humans have developed something called social media. Could you explain this concept?" Jake's face lit up with enthusiasm, which sent a wave of panic through the assembled delegates. "Oh, social media is amazing. It's a way for people to stay connected and share parts of their lives with friends and family, even across vast distances." "Share parts of their lives?" Dr. Helix repeated faintly. "Sure. People post pictures of their meals, updates about their jobs, photos of their pets. Oh, and cat videos. Lots and lots of cat videos." The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives were shouting in 17 different languages, several delegates fainted, and Security Chief Cragg actually drew his weapon before remembering that Jake was technically unarmed. "You voluntarily share personal information?" Counselor Blim shrieked. "With strangers?" "Well, they're not strangers for long," Jake explained patiently. "That's kind of the point. You start following someone because you like their content, maybe you comment on a few posts. Next thing you know, you're having actual conversations and learning about their life." Dr. Helix was making rapid notes on his tablet, his tentacles moving so fast they were blurring. "Mass voluntary surveillance combined with emotional bonding protocols," he muttered. "They've gamified intelligence gathering." "It's not intelligence gathering," Jake protested. "It's just sharing. People like feeling connected to each other." "And these cat videos you mentioned?" General Thruck asked with the tone of someone discussing biological warfare. Jake pulled out his phone, which caused half the security team to dive for cover. "Oh, you want to see some? This one's hilarious. It's a cat that's figured out how to open doors, and it's terrorizing the family dog." He held up the device, and despite their better judgment, several representatives leaned forward to look. Within seconds, they were watching a small Earth creature systematically outsmarting a much larger Earth creature, and despite themselves, they found it oddly entertaining. "See?" Jake said, apparently oblivious to the existential crisis he was causing. "It's just harmless fun that brings people together." "Brings people together," Dr. Helix whispered, his voice cracking. "They've weaponized cute animal footage. We estimate that Earth's social media networks have approximately 4 billion active users," tech specialist Zork reported, his voice barely audible. "They're voluntarily sharing personal data, forming emotional connections, and creating support networks with beings they've never met in person." The true horror of the situation was beginning to sink in. Humans hadn't just figured out how to make friends, they'd created a galaxy-spanning system for making friends automatically. "Ambassador," Chancellor Vortex said with the tone of someone asking about nuclear launch codes, "how many of these social media connections does the average human maintain?" Jake thought about it. "I guess it depends on the person. My teenage niece has like 3,000 followers, but she's really outgoing. I probably only have about 500 connections, but I actually talk to most of them regularly. 500 personal relationships per human." The math was staggering. "They're not conquering the galaxy," Dr. Helix said, his professional composure finally cracking completely. "They're befriending it into submission." "I prefer to think of it as community building," Jake said helpfully, then brightened. Hey, would you guys like me to show you how to set up accounts? I bet you'd love connecting with other species. The Andromedans have this great cooking show that goes viral every week. The offer to help them join the network was somehow the most terrifying thing he'd said yet. We need to vote, Chancellor Vortex announced, his voice heavy with resignation. Ambassador Murphy, if you would please wait outside while we deliberate. Of course, Jake said cheerfully, gathering up his things. Take all the time you need. I'll just be in the waiting area if you need anything. As the chamber doors closed behind him, the assembled representatives sat in stunned silence. Finally, General Throck spoke up. We're doomed, aren't we? Completely, Dr. Helix confirmed, slumped in his chair like a deflated balloon. They've turned friendship into a weapon of mass influence, and they don't even realize they're doing it. The worst part, Counselor Blim added miserably, is that their methods actually work. Did you see how quickly they resolved the Rigelian Tau-Sechan dispute? 3 years of negotiations, solved with coffee and common sense. Tech specialist Zork looked up from his calculations. I've been running projections. If we deny their membership application, it won't stop them. They'll just continue building relationships independently. Within 50 standard years, they'll have informal alliances with most of known space. And if we accept their application? Vortex asked, though he already knew the answer. Same result, but faster and more organized. The horrible truth was that they were trapped. Humans had already won. They just hadn't bothered to tell anyone they were playing. There's something else, Security Chief Cragg said reluctantly. While we've been in session, Ambassador Murphy has been in the waiting area. And? Mortil. He's been chatting with the janitorial staff. They love him. Apparently he helped fix a scheduling conflict they'd been having with their work rotations. And now they're all talking about how Earth might be interested in importing some of their traditional handicrafts. The collective groan that went up from the chamber could probably have been heard from orbit. Motion to vote, Vortex said wearily. The vote was unanimous, though not for the reasons Earth probably expected. They weren't voting to accept humanity because they wanted to. They were voting to accept them because resistance was futile. When Jake was called back into the chamber, he found 47 different species looking like they'd just lost a war they hadn't known they were fighting. Ambassador Murphy, Vortex announced formally, the Galactic Council hereby accepts Earth's application for membership, with one condition. Jake's smile could have powered a small star. That's wonderful. What's the condition? You will establish and teach a mandatory diplomatic training program for all Council species, covering human relationship building techniques. You want me to teach a class on making friends? Jake asked, clearly delighted. We prefer to call it advanced human emotional warfare, General Throck muttered. That sounds a bit dramatic, Jake laughed. How about interpersonal relations and collaborative problem solving? Even their course titles were weaponized friendliness. Acceptable. Vortex sighed. Welcome to the Galactic Council, Ambassador Murphy. As Jake shook hands with each representative, another human custom that was apparently designed to create physical bonding experiences, Chancellor Vortex reflected on the day's events. They'd been outmaneuvered by a species that conquered through kindness, dominated through donuts, and built empires through asking people about their weekends. The most dangerous man in the room really had been the one with no weapons, just a human smile, and an apparently genuine interest in everyone's well-being. And somehow, despite themselves, Vortex found that he was actually looking forward to Jake's friendship-building workshops. The humans had won again, and they'd probably send thank you cards afterward.